All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 9:30 call. Amy, as you can tell, Amy's out today, so we'll be hosting Titus and I will be co-hosting the 9:30 call this morning, and we are super excited to have Andrea Parker here with us, who's going to be talking a little bit about space, grace, and pace. So Andrea, I'll turn it over to you. And we typically ask 9:30 callers to just start off by sharing a little bit about you and how you came to be in your current role. And then if you have any slides, you can feel free to pull those up and jump right in.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here. I really appreciate the opportunity to connect with the 9:30 call. I in my transition from K-12 education to higher ed administration. I did find it a little isolating, so it's great to start off the day with with this call and with you all here. So wonderful. I'll be brief in my introduction. I started off my education in a privileged suburban area of Pennsylvania, Lancaster County, where I lived in a home with two parents who had access to college education. Um, and in our home, I did experience four of the adverse childhood experiences, one of which was undiagnosed and untreated mental health conditions of one of my primary caregivers. And that made, particularly around the time of going to college and making choices about college, pretty tough. Long story short, I ended up in studying abroad 2 years in France and then spending most of my adult life in Spain, where I got started in education. I taught in K-12 education for 15 years in Spain, bilingual education, and then returned to do my master's at Harvard Graduate School of Education, where I got into the realm of policy, and that's kind of what brings me to this work. So I have a small company where we try to solve the problem of identifying and addressing unconscious bias in the area of family engagement. So working with school, early childhood centers and school districts to identify biases that we all have towards families. And I will share a few brief experiences that I had, since this is the slides that I'm going to share are really about working with candidates for early childhood education, um, to dig into their own stories and our own struggles as strengths in interview processes to land not just any job, but a good job, a job with the conditions that we all deserve. We know what the conditions tend to be in early childhood education and the pay, and I know we're all working hard here to improve those. And so the experiences that I've had that have led me to this work is just hearing the way, and I'll just say we, hearing the way educators and administrators sometimes refer to families and children in ways that are, well, racist, aggressive, biased, and really not leading to seeing families in positive light. And one of those experiences, when I was visiting a school and I was standing outside a kindergarten classroom, and there was a teacher inside the classroom. It was a music class, and a 5-year-old student had asked permission to go to the bathroom. The student was standing at the door, and the teacher said, "If you're not back in 5 minutes, I'm going to call the office." And these are types of things that unfortunately we hear all the time. Another time, I was having lunch with some colleagues, and one of my colleagues referred to a student of Arab descent as Moro, which in Spanish, at least in Spain, categorizes the entire Arab population in a very, very negative and racist way. And so in that moment, I was just really taken aback. And when the teacher said, "Oh, this student, he's just so Moro, you know what I mean?" And I kind of like put my fork down on my plate and I said, "No, I don't actually know what you mean. Can you explain?" And I think what was most shocking to me was not only that she had said this, but that nobody else in the room was really standing up for the student. Um, and that teacher continued teaching in the building, and with students from all over the world. So those are a few experiences that I've had that have led me to this work. Um, so I do have some slides I can share. I was hoping my co-presenter, we presented these slides at the Bristol Northern Essex Community College conference. No, it was Bristol Community College conference a few weeks ago, and so I was hoping my co-presenter could be here with me today. So I do have those slides. If you're all interested in them, I can share them. I've also shared them with Amy. Um, yeah, so I'll go ahead and share my screen.
That would be great. And yeah, we'll post the follow-ups or we'll post the slides in our follow-up materials folder so everyone will have access to them after the call as well if they want to look back. But thank you so much for sharing some of that context about your work and sort of how you came to be working on family engagement today.
Thank you. If I can get, is everyone looking at the slide that says finding your voice?
We can see the whole window, but now it looks perfect.
Now it's good? Okay.
Yep, thank you.
All right. So as I said, we presented this a few weeks ago, and the audience was administrators in higher education. I co-presented with somebody from our internship and career office. So at Bunker Hill Community College, we are a very large institution, of course, and we do have several offices that I know not all community colleges have. One of those offices is the Office of Internship and Career Development. And so we worked together to create these slides, and I want us to all kind of just, if it's okay, engage here for a minute and think about a challenge. And I don't mean out loud, I just mean in, yourself, your own reflection. Think about a challenge that you've had in your life. It can be any challenge, personal or professional. And then think about, based on that challenge, a choice that you had to make. Because when we face challenges, we have to make a choice, whether it's the right choice or the wrong choice or better or worse, we make a choice, right? And then what was the outcome of that choice? This is not my framework. This actually comes from a scholar, Marshall Gantz at the Harvard Kennedy School. And so I think this is really easy to remember when we're working with students. Think of a challenge, think of a choice, think of what that outcome was. And that when we're in an interview for whatever career in the context of this call for a position in early childhood center, the interview gives us a very brief moment, but important moment to lean into this challenge that we faced and to use the struggle that we might have faced as our strength. Just hope I got. Sorry, I know I'm skipping around. There seems to be a little delay here. There we go. Okay. So we kind of differentiated between an elevator pitch where we're really trying to sell ourselves and we want to be concise and confident and also share our passion. So in this presentation, we actually engaged in a bit of a role play where I shared how I would come into an appointment in the career development office where maybe I wasn't so confident and didn't have, such great eye contact and really wasn't sure. Like my answer to why do you want to be in this work is like, well, I really like kids, right? I've always liked kids and I have nieces and nephews and, we want to go deeper than that. Whoops. Sorry.
No worries. It's a beautiful background also.
I'm glad that's what you're all looking at and not like my busy desktop that's so
I'm
unorganized.
gonna say I'm very impressed by unless they're all hidden right now, but your desktop looks very clean.
My computer's been doing really weird things this morning. Um, so I'm gonna try. It looks like there we are. Okay. Sorry about that. That was fast, right? Didn't shut down the
Perfect.
whole computer. Okay. Um, So we encourage our students to really come into the interview and to digging into their story a little bit. So this was some of the coaching I received from my colleague in the role play that, if you want to we want to put our best foot forward. And the reason we want to be confident is because if we don't believe in what we're saying, then why would someone else? If we don't think we're a good fit for the job, why would someone else? And we know in working with underserved populations, this confidence piece, a lot of students may not have had, the opportunity or access to resources to dig in and see what our students see what they've experienced as, very negative, and we want to draw on that as power and strength. And also digging into how we bring value to the table, to bring value to the, and so I'd also, when we get to the questions, I'd love to hear from some of you, because I know some of you on this call do run centers, and I'm eager to hear how this resonates with you when you're interviewing candidates, because we all know there's no shortage there's no shortage of jobs, right? There's more a shortage of candidates for the positions that are open. And we have to really sell our school and our environment and our center as well in order to land to get the best, the best candidates in the door. We really want our students to step into who they are and who they want to be and to get comfortable being uncomfortable, sharing stories, especially when it's something negative that's happened to us. For example, I could have shared a story about my own biases and how those showed up as well. When I began studying at Harvard, I was having a conversation with a doctoral student, a Black woman, and I made a comment, something about people of color being less educated. And the way that I said was, of course, not my intent for my comment to come across the way it did, but it did. And in that situation, I really needed to own my own impact that I had on the student. And what I really meant to communicate was that people of color have less access to education and to higher education. And sharing these experiences it puts us in a vulnerable place, right? It makes us really reflect on any negative impact that we may have had on people. And so getting comfortable being uncomfortable is also a skill that we strive to build in our students. Um, Thinking about what the student themselves wants to be known for, what they want to be associated with, the words, with coming away from the interview. Like I even think today after this presentation, like what are the words that stick with you all in terms of how you describe what you learned or the presenter, in this case, myself. Whoops. And this is if there's anything you take away from today, like even take a screenshot or a picture of this slide. This is what we really left people with in terms of a framework for sharing with students, with student educators, to always introduce themselves with their name and their year in school, why they think they're a good fit for the role, what their interests are, and I'll share some of my own, both inside and outside of the program. And then we actually have students, find and print out the job description as well so that they can speak to some of those core skills like communicating with families, building or using curricula, um, uh, conflict resolution, of course, teaching and engaging with students, providing culturally responsive instruction. And then, of course, tell a story, right? The challenge, the choice, the outcome. And then always to have questions prepared. My colleague from the Internship and Career Office suggests 9 questions. I was kind of like, wow, that's a lot of questions to prepare. Nobody has time to ask 9 questions in an interview, right? But it's always better. His response to that was it's always better to be over prepared than under prepared, and to have those questions be, um, you know, one about or 3 about the job role, 3 about the person that's interviewing you, because they're likely to be your supervisor or somebody that interacts with you. And you 3 about the industry or the company itself, and that the questions be relevant, if possible, to something that happened or something that was said during the interview, um, because then that's when the interview really turns into a conversation, which in my way of thinking is always a good sign when the interview is more of a conversation than a formal one way um, one way approach. So I think that was about all I had, because the rest of the slides are part of our role play. So we did like a commercial break where we fast forwarded to what the student had learned after, some time of practicing. And then we had our audience engage as well. And we did all this in 30 minutes. So it was pretty it was intense. And I think the feedback we got was really good. Folks appreciated. Not everyone engaged in the storytelling aspect, but did engage in terms of what it means to have an internship and career office to support underserved students in landing not just any job, but a job that has fair working conditions and the best salary possible. So I think that leaves us with just about 10 minutes for questions. I've open to any questions regarding my consulting practice for family engagement, anything we do here at Bunker Hill. I will say I have limited experience in early childhood education as far as centers go. I really appreciated getting to know a lot of you and interacting with a few of your centers as well. I'm a parent, 2 children, age 17 and 13. I love to do yoga, and in my previous life before children, I was a triathlete and I played ultimate frisbee. But it's been a long time since I've had time to do any of that.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. So in the chat, there's a couple comments. I'll just kind of read through those while folks are gathering their thoughts and kind of getting ready to ask any questions that they might have. But Tom offers that it's so great to offer a personal, uncomfortable, and yet positive growth-oriented learning experience, and that sort of framing this as that sort of learning experience is really important. And it seems like Donna's sort of reaffirming some of the skills that you all are helping students to build, and that they're seeing that in sort of job applicants as well. So seeing even more kind of like basic concerns, poor written communication, lack of follow through, no call, show in, no call, no shows, even after confirming an interview. And I see Sheila also sort of is saying that that is a real trend, that they're seeing so many directors facing that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that kind of comment question. I guess I'm hearing a question in there like, how common is it to set up interviews with folks and then not hear back or have them not show? And kind of why, I guess I would want to dig into that, the unconscious bias that surrounds that experience, right? Like there are so many circumstances that could fall into why that particular person didn't show. Not the least of which is just being incredibly nervous. Of course, there's also cases of, poor organization and time management. But again, we're talking about generally young folks with limited career experience and or older folks with busy, busy lives and lots of responsibilities. So I would just, in leaning into the name of my company space, Grace Pace, and just having a little bit of grace for folks and leading with a positive assumption. Are they okay? Did something happen? That doesn't mean that that's the person you want to hire. And I know that takes an extra effort. And I know no one has extra time that's on this call. But just kind of giving folks a bit of grace and thinking about all the circumstances that could be. I mean, it might end up being your best candidate. Maybe they were just too nervous to show and they just needed a little bit of outreach.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think even just, asking the question, like we don't often get to that step of saying, well, why didn't they show? We just react to the not showing and then sort of move on. But I see Donna said that she follows up with, are you okay? And sometimes gets crickets. So
And in that
it's an
case,
interesting piece of following up, though.
right. Yeah. In that case, I'm not sure what, I guess in that case, that's the end of the conversation. That's the end of the communication,
Yeah.
right? But um I'd also argue there if they don't follow up, maybe something really did happen. And there's yeah.
Yeah.
Um
And then Titus asks, could you repeat who you're working with? So is it Bunker Hall Community College students from all majors? Is it specific to the early childhood programs?
yeah, I'm reflecting on what I've shared today. I realize it's all my work is very broad, is what I will say. So I have a small consulting company where we try to solve the problem of unconscious biases in education spaces. Not that we can solve it, but to identify and address unconscious biases. The slides that I just shared today are from what my full-time work is at Bunker Hill Community College. I'm a hustler, right? I'm a single mom. I have two kids, one headed to college, so I have always have multiple jobs, always have. So the slides that I've shared today are from Bunker Hill Community College, a partnership between our Department of Early Childhood Education and the Internship and Career Development Office. So that means that I work only with students, or my staff works with students who are pursuing their certificate and or their associates in early childhood education, and for that reason headed towards trying to get a job, or they might already have a job. In the case of our career pathways grantees, they already are working and they're trying to advance their career or to get the classes that they need to go from assistant to lead teacher, from lead teacher to director. The Internship Career Development Office works with students of all majors. And so we partnered together to develop this presentation. And because of the context of my work, it made sense to share an example around early childhood education. I will say, we do definitely we have two grants, and one of the challenges that we face in our grant from the city of Boston is that the city of Boston pays for students to get their associates, and as a trade-off, they're expected to work for 3 years in an early childhood center in the city of Boston. 3 years is a long time. even 2 years of the program is a long time. And during that time, many of our students are working in retail or as Amazon delivers or Uber drivers, and they realize they can make more money and they can have more flexible working hours. And so, it is a struggle and a challenge to keep people engaged, to keep our students engaged in the sector. And that's why I've just loved hearing over the past few months so many individual stories of how and why people stay in the sector. Like, for example, when housing is provided or when just, subsidized housing is provided, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, those are some of those sort of unrelated to the what you might think of as sort of job quality benefits, but that make a huge difference
Right.
when you're looking for a role. I'll also just add that, at Strategies, we've had so many incredible interns come out of Bunker Hill and have so enjoyed this partnership. And what's been, I think, really interesting for us too is that so many of the students have been outside of the early childhood sector. So they've been studying
Yep.
communications or paralegal studies or whatever it is. And helping sort of them to see those connections between what their sort of coursework is and their interest in early childhood. And we've really enjoyed that sort of cross-sector partnership there that a lot of the students have brought to the work.
Yes, we have here posters. The students have created like sticker posters that are displayed across the college. So there's two from Strategies of Children. I took my staff up to visit and to take a look at them. It's really exciting that, students working on an associate's degree can access internships in policy and advocacy. I know when I studied policy, which was not so long ago, it was just 7 or 8 years ago I studied international education policy, and I took, I don't know, 10 or 15 different classes, but not a single class taught us about the the policy and advocacy process. Like when you really want to make a change and you really want to advocate for a bill or a law, like how do you do that and what's the process? And I learned this, and the other thing I didn't mention is I worked at the Federation for Children with Special Needs for a while as a senior statewide family engagement trainer. And there's in that world, there were frequently bills that we wanted to advocate for. And one of my connections, I forget, I think it was Maria Mosias, the Office of Child Advocate, helped me to understand that there's only certain times during the year when it even makes sense to advocate, right? Because of the process and the timing and that sort of thing. And so I think also programs that are that drive students to learn about policy also need to kind of have a 1.0 version of policy. Like what is policy actually? How is it made and how can we impact policy?
100% agree. I mean, even just reflecting on my own experience, I feel like I learned so much of
Right.
that from my internship at Strategies and, going on to work there. But that's something we talk about a lot on the 930 college, sort of the timeline and when to engage, where we've been talking a lot about the budget over the past few weeks, and we are sort of right in the middle of that piece right now. But that is a very important point. Aisha also shares in the chat, and I just want to kind of double down on this too, but just thanks for sort of you being vulnerable and sharing some of that learning moment for you personally and sort of stepping into the real conversations and how that supports growth. And I do think that, it's just so obvious from, having these conversations with you today and sort of how you talk about your own personal experiences and sort of bring who you are into this conversation. I think you're really modeling that sort of energy and that value or belief for all of us too, which is really incredible. So I just want to thank you for
Yeah,
that piece as well.
small.
And then Sheila asks, what advice do you have for directors in their recruiting practices to help them reach the most qualified candidates?
That's a great question. I
Oh, I think you might have frozen for a second there. Oh, I think she dropped off. Her computer might have frozen again.
Sorry. Yeah. Everything
Oh, there
okay
you
now?
are. Yep, you're
Okay.
back.
So that was really fast. That was a great question. So tips and strategies for was it reaching diverse candidates or just reaching candidates?
I think just reaching the most qualified candidate.
Most qualified candidates. Well, I guess I would encourage us first to think about what do we mean by qualified? Do we mean like they have the coursework they need? Do we mean that they're experienced? Do we mean that they have like strong references, or let's just assume all of the above? And that was giving me time to think because this is my colleague's area of expertise. I think definitely reaching out to the programs that are delivering on strong that are preparing strong graduates. I would argue that our program here at Bunker Hill is very strong. I know also a lot of the community colleges, but there's also alternative programs that I see, for example, in the city of Cambridge, where we now have universal pre-K. That's where I live in Cambridge. There's universal pre-K, so there's lots of kind of city-built programs around building, out programs where students can get experience and at the same time do coursework. So I would say networking and finding out what are those programs and um, knowing what's strong about the candidates that are coming out, knowing what you're looking for too. You know, you might consider a strong candidate to be somebody who can really connect with kids and families, and maybe they start in an assistant teacher role, and then your center supports them in gaining the coursework and the experience they need to move into lead teacher. Um, I also spent some time in out of school programming, which is also EEC licensed. And so I think there's probably considerable people working in out of school time that would want to work in during the regular school day because out of school time is tough for folks who have children and families. So maybe recruiting from that pool as well, because the out of school time programs, in my own experience, my own kids, does such amazing work. Like sometimes I walk into programs and I'm like, why can't the regular school day be like this? Like there's just so much play and so much happiness and so maybe recruiting from that pool. I'm just thinking on my toes here.
Yeah, those are great suggestions. There's a couple more questions. I know we're probably not going to get to all of them, but maybe I'll kind of combine two or three into one final question here. But can you talk a little bit about sort of, your advice for getting out of the imposter syndrome and how that might also relate to making a memorable pitch that is effective?
Making a memorable what?
Elevator pitch. So, when you're
Oh,
describing the work you do, how do you kind of get past that initial barrier and then sort of describe yourself in a way that's memorable and effective?
short answer is therapy. It requires a lot of internal work, right? Like even sharing that story that I shared, I wasn't 100% comfortable sharing it because I know we all make judgments, whether it's consciously or unconsciously. So requires a lot of digging, some reading, some following of folks who have been through that journey. I love to follow, someone I follow is Elena Aguiar. You might sound familiar. She's a coach of coaches. And she always shares like a lot of vulnerable. It's what makes her such an excellent coach is that she shares with teachers or coaches experiences that she's had in on the ground where she's failed. And so I think that, identifying those moments and always thinking about the learning, what came out of it, um, and getting lots of practice and sharing the story over and over again with different people in different contexts. Um, I first learned about the value of storytelling in a graduate course that was called Reimagining Integrated and Diverse Schools. And our lead coach, shared a story, and she shared it at the beginning and then through the end. And so the stories that we share, I want to say they evolved because the experience was what it was, but our capacity to explain the story and the growth and the learning develops as we share it more and more. So I would say short answer therapy, longer answer, a lot of personal work, some reading, watching documentaries, practicing with other people, hearing other people's stories as well. Like if we had time, I would dive in here to what was that for those of you that are comfortable sharing that challenge that you thought of, and the choice that you made and the outcome of that. We'd be digging into that if we had a little bit more time.
I love that. I mean, maybe we could even build that into some of the conversations that we have on the sharing the mic time in the next few weeks too. We have sort of an unstructured 9:30 call time built in, and I love this kind of idea of digging into that deeper. And yeah, your just emphasis on practice. I think we talk about that a lot with everything related to advocacy as well. Just having the opportunity to practice these skills makes such a difference. So, all right. Thank you so much for that. I know it's 10:03, so thanks for the extra few minutes there. We'll go ahead and share the slides in the follow-up, and I'll send over, there's one or two other questions that we didn't quite get to, so I'll send those to you just so that you have them as well and can see what those are. But thank you so much for being here today and sort of highlighting this topic and sharing the slides. I think it was a great or Tuesday morning now, start of the week conversation.
Awesome. I've dropped my email in the chat. So feel free to reach out if I didn't answer your question. I'd be happy to set up a time we could call and talk about it.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome.
Have a
Have a
great
great day.